Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. This is the Midweek Debate. We are back with our boxing gloves on, ready to throw a few punches and debate. It's me, Steven Railston, and I'm joined by Tyrone Marshall in the studio. Tyrone's had a fresh haircut. He's just told us it was last week, but Ty, it looks fresher than last week. It looked quite good.
Got to pay the money, mate. That's what you get.
Looking very sharp.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, mate. Yeah.
I'm off to Cheltenham next week. I'll expand on that.
Be looking fresh.
Well, I'll expand on that at the end of the podcast because we'll have to have a postponement. But I'm going to get a haircut on Monday, put my suit on, look $1 million and feel $1 million, I think.
$1 million might be overdoing it, yeah. But yeah,
pound shop version.
You'd be selling that suit by Friday, mate.
I think you might be right, actually. As usual, I think you know the concept by now. We're focusing in on a subject in the first part. And me and Ty have decided to discuss Bruno Fernandes in the first part of today's podcast. That is on the back of some really scathing comments from Roy Keane around, was it last week or a week and a half ago? Anyways, I've never seen Roy Keane lose his head in such fashion.
Have you not?
Not like that. Not on a podcast. Sorry, I should rephrase. As a pundit in
regularly,
that. Okay, maybe I should rephrase that. In that specific studio.
Yeah.
Because he has lost his head on Sky Sports. But I don't think he's actually lost quite like that. He was losing it to an extent I probably haven't seen.
He's quite dry on the podcast a lot of the time.
Yeah, and he exploded about Bruno Fernandes, didn't he?
He did. Really odd. I mean, I can see why Fernandes gets people's backs up and why, he gets people's goats at times, so to speak. But, he's clearly...
Get their goats? I mean, I'm learning every podcast, aren't I? Really?
You are.
Get their goats.
It's an education for you, this. But I just thought, for someone who watches United and follows United regularly, I thought it was bizarre comments to make, really, given his importance to the team.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, I'm not going to read it out, the whole rant, but he kind of said, save us, they're 15th in the league, and he's saving them. Praise the Lord. I can't do a Roy Keane impression, so I won't do it. You have to have a starting point. I go back to it all. Talent is not enough. Bruno's a talented player, but talent's not enough. That's a snippet, but he was way more scathing than that. And you're right, Ty. Very surprising to go for Fernandes, in my opinion, when he is the one member of that dressing room who, since he's arrived at the club, has consistently performed. And it would have been recorded before the Ipswich game, but it wasn't exactly good timing, was it? I mean, Fernandes dragged them back into the game at Goodison Park against Everton. He had a hand at all 3 goals against Ipswich. Then those comments are published. But not just them 2 games. He's always there. He always stands up and he's counted.
Yeah, he does. I think it's 7 goals in a row now that he's basically been at the heart of. And yeah, he's the one player over the last 4 or 5 years that has pretty much consistently performed. He's had difficult spells, but they've barely lasted longer than a few weeks or a month, maybe. Generally, he's good. His performance level is consistent. There's no wild swings. You know what you're getting with him. His figures for goals and assists are exemplary for someone who is essentially an attacking midfielder or a midfielder. It's, his numbers and his performances speak for themselves. And like I say, I can see why people will be annoyed at him. Every single fan base gives him grief, don't they? He's a figure of hate, I think. We heard it on Sunday with the song about him looking like a rat.
Bizarre, those chants, you don't think?
They are bizarre, yeah. But he gets it every week. And a lot of them, an awful lot more derogatory than that. Some of them we couldn't repeat on here. And they were doing it at one point when he was defending a corner just in front of the Fulham fans, and you could see him kind of smirking and laughing at it. And it does show that like I say, I can see why he would annoy people. We've seen how easily he gets worked up on the pitch. His conduct with referees isn't always great. He can lose his composure very quickly. But on a performance level, he's dragging United up by the skin of the teeth.
He's one of those players, if he plays for you, you absolutely adore him. And if he plays against you and you're a rival team, you probably dislike him. But that's a testament to his quality. But Roy Keane is associated with the club. I know he has admitted that he doesn't support United, but he's a United legend. Surely you should be kind of praising these players and being aware of the quality, because anyone who's watched United each week understands that Fernandes, again, is the only one who turns up every week.
Yeah. Well, I think we've spoken on this podcast about how players sign for United and get worse and then leave and get better. And, you know, I struggle to think of many players that have signed for United and even stayed on the level they were performing at. In terms of players that have signed and then got better, I'm thinking Fernandes, basically, over the last 5 years. I can't think of another. Maybe you can off the top of your head.
Garnacho would be one, wouldn't he? But he was very young, so it's a different category.
It's a different level, isn't it? You know, he was 17, I think, when he signed.
From Atletico Madrid.
Maybe. So, you know, in terms of players who were signed at a level to then kick on or, you know, go up a level or even just perform at the same level, he's pretty much the only one who's done it. And he's done it consistently since day one, since his debut against Wolves when he played a deeper position. The next game he was further up. And ever since then, his performance level has been great. And he does, you know, the captaincy is a whole different debate. It's something I'm sure we're going to touch on. And like I can see why that does wind some people up. But in terms of performance level, I mean, you know, you say where would this team be without him? I genuinely think they'd be in a proper relegation battle without him.
I think they would be.
Thinking about
completely
where they'd be without him at the moment.
He scored 15 times last season. That was just one behind Rasmus Højlund, who scored 16, obviously. He won the Sir Matt Busby Player of the Year award for a third time. Yeah. It's not a fluke that. You don't win the Player of the Year award 3 times and be a bad player. We'll get on to his captain credentials. I think it's been a bit overplayed. He can be petulant with referees. We've all seen that. And Gary Neville was wrong in that game at Anfield when he suggested he was asking to come off, didn't he? And he got that one massively wrong. There is an element of a bit of play acting and complaining. He does complain. But he's a fantastic footballer, and I think that kind of makes up for it. Not everyone is perfect, and in the heat of the moment, he might not be ideal in that sense. But having said that, he is a leader, and in my opinion, he was the only logical choice to succeed Harry Maguire when Ten Hag made that decision in the summer of 2023 to strip him of the captaincy. He was the only man who could have took on that armband. He was the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I can't think of another player who could fulfil it, and in a way, it's worked because those of us close to the club see Maguire doing more. Taking on more leadership responsibilities now than he did as captain, in a way.
I think he stayed the same. I wouldn't say more now. Yeah, I think they've actually got I think they've got an excellent relationship, them two, and I think it's a credit to both of them that it's kind of worked. Even when Maguire was captain, Fernandes was still a leader, and the perfect foil to each other in a leadership sense.
Yeah, I think they probably are. I just think Maguire's better off without the responsibility, without the pressure of being captain. I think the pressure of having the captaincy next to his name kind of carried him a little bit, and I think he's better now. He can be the natural leader without being the captain. And like I say, if he's not going to be the captain, Fernandes is the only possibility. You know, it depends how you look at leadership. There's different ways of leadership, and the best way Fernandes does is through his performances and through dragging teams up with him. We know he's really good with the young players. After his goal on Sunday, I saw him go up to Chido when the teams were lining up to kick off and just offer a few kind of words of advice.
Are you on first name basis with Chido?
I am. Yeah,
good mates.
Very good mates, mate. Yeah, very good. I knew he was dropping Martin long before anyone else. That's what he said. So I saw him go up to Obi. And it just doesn't feel right calling him Obi. It's too short.
It's pedantic that way. You can't call him Chido.
So he's good with the young players. The whole petulance thing. Like I said, there is a skill in how to talk to referees and getting them on side. And I don't doubt that Fernandes is not very good at that. We've got to be honest. I can't imagine, if you're a referee, I can't imagine you're enjoying refereeing him. And I can't imagine, having a good relationship with a referee does count for something, I think. And he doesn't always go about it that well.
Doesn't play the game, does he?
Doesn't play the game. He complains about virtually every decision. And it is a bit too much at times, but that's just who he is. And the reality is he hates losing. And that is, that is just him. And you'd rather have a player who hates losing than a player who doesn't care. And yes, he doesn't always show it in the right way, but he's still the only option for captain, really. And we've seen a few times that Liverpool game, certainly the 7-0. I think there's been a couple of others where his captaincy's been kind of become a talking point that week, and managers have always defended him. You know, like I say, Neville did get it wrong in that Liverpool game, but his behaviour in the second half of that Liverpool game was poor for United captain.
You don't think it's only ever been a talking point for the people who don't actually know and follow the club as closely as fans do and as we do as Manchester-based journalists? I think everyone in the pack and everyone who, journalist-wise, who is there each week, who watches every game, the supporters who are there week in, week out, they've never questioned him as a captain, I believe. But it's in the wider media, maybe pundits, after those games, it'll become a talking point. But I think it says it all if it's not a talking point with the people who watch him most.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I don't think they ever question him as a captain, purely because, like we say, there is no alternative. I think his leadership style has probably been discussed and written about. And I think there are some fans out there who would like to see a different side to him at times.
That's not him, as we've said.
But like I said, no, that's not him. I mean, maybe you make the argument that he should, as captain now, as a senior player, he should learn to do things slightly differently. But it does all come from this hatred of losing, and the unfortunate reality is he loses a hell of a lot at the moment. So you're gonna see it. And I think after that Liverpool game, I think there were questions about what he does and how he does it. I mean, I always remember that Liverpool game when he essentially shoved a linesman, and as soon as he did that, I thought he's in big trouble here, and nothing ever came of it. And I always felt he got lucky with that. The fact that the linesman made nothing of it. You lay your hands on a referee, and you're asking for big trouble, and he did that, and the linesman basically just accepted it for what it was, which was a very frustrated player. A different linesman, a pickier linesman, could have been straight up waving his flag. Referee comes over, and you're not talking a 3-game ban. Then you're probably talking a 12, 14 game ban. So, I thought the linesman did him a favour that day, to be fair. And you do see that kind of almost loss of self-control with him at times, but that is his personality, that he just hates losing so much.
You've just talked about his off-pitch demeanour as well, the way he's fantastic with young players. I think of how he handled Kobbie Mainoo when he first came into the team, his recent exchanges with Toby Collier and speaking about Collier's qualities in interviews. And he just stands out like a leader in that sense as well. He's really, really good with those players. You think back to last season when United made the FA Cup final. We've just discussed Ratcliffe's cuts on the podcast recently and how that's affected staff morale. Fernandes offered to put his own hands in his pocket and pay for the trip himself. It just shows you what kind of person he is. And we were talking about mixed zone interactions recently, me and you actually, and it's very difficult when United lose a draw because the players don't want to speak to you, and some of them don't have respect for you as a journalist. And look, I'm not going to get the violin out. They don't have to reply. No. That's on. Do you know what I mean? It's their prerogative. But it does go a long way, I think, when players have a little bit of respect and say, "Not today, sorry." Just a little response for me. They don't have to. I'm not saying, but I respect that. And whenever I've seen Fernandes and spoken to Fernandes, Eriksen is another, to be fair, as well. Christian Eriksen. Fernandes has always said, "Sorry, not today." Blah blah blah. And he actually gives a reason. You don't have to give a reason. No.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You don't. There's rights holders that you have to speak to, and there's the written media.
We understand
that you don't. If you don't want to do it, just say no. That is fine. I mean, there's a player in that squad who left recently who never said yes or no, who just ignored you, and that feels incredibly rude. I've just asked you, Marcus, do you want to speak?
I was going to say, I thought I almost got him at Ipswich, Portman Road actually, which
just to walk past and not say anything is rude. And at least Fernandes does say no. If I was being critical, I would like him as a captain to do it a little bit more often.
Yeah.
The one thing you'd say is he probably does do a lot of the broadcast ones and the rights holders when they lose. And obviously, this is a team that's had a lot of difficult results over the last few years. They've had a lot of fronting up to do, and it feels like Fernandes and Maguire are kind of the two go-tos. De Gea had become that in his last season.
And to give some insight for supporters, we could list the players now who the club are willing, and which players, I should say, are willing to talk. So Diego Dallo, Fernandes, Onana, Maguire.
Pretty decent. Yeah. There's not
Trying to
loads.
think of anyone else.
Hoyland's not done loads. It's really good in
No,
Denmark.
not this season.
Done loads.
We're missing.
So
Ahmad's done it a few times, to be fair to him, actually.
Yeah.
He's done it recently.
It's not a squad full of great talkers.
The list as well. Sorry, I'm still listing
reading a few off now.
But that's around 6 players, though, isn't it? And you've kind of got a small, very small group of select players who are willing to come out and speak. And again, we're not getting the begging ball out. We're not playing the violin. But I think little mix-on reactions actually, although they sometimes can be tiny, passing fleeting moments, I think they offer a brief glimpse into a player's personality. and I think you can learn a little bit about them.
Yeah, they do. I think,
didn't sound convinced there.
Well, it depends what you're getting, doesn't it? But yeah, there's always the possibility that you're going to unearth a nugget, and that you're going to, like you say, you're going to see something.
I more mean the way they actually talk to you when they walk past and how they carry themselves, and you observe them in the tunnel and how they exchange with other people and teammates, and you can glean little bits. I'm not necessarily talking about when they're on the record with us.
No, I mean, I'll be honest, if I was gleaming anything from personalities in mixed zones, I think the fact that no United player has spoken after a defeat, I'm pretty sure since they lost 4-0 to Brentford in Ten Hag's first season, tells you an awful lot about the character of the squad, and not in a good way. Every other Premier League team, players are speaking to the press after defeats beyond the... and I know United will have a lot of rights holders to speak to, but so do every other club. I was at City of the week when they lost 2-0 to Liverpool, and City brought Nico Gonzalez out to speak. He's just signed for the club. They've just lost. They played okay in that game, I guess, but they're still bringing a player out, a player who's willing to speak. And like I say, at United, when they lose a game, it just doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened for over 2 years now. And that is, maybe it's reading too much into it. Maybe they just, like I said, they don't have to speak to us, so why would they want to? But it's a chance to change a narrative. There's every national newspaper journalist is represented in a way in those mixed zones by the pack. The quotes go out the following day. It's a chance to reshape the narrative or to put your own spin on it. At the end of the day, by not speaking, it doesn't mean we're not going to write anything. Every paper is going to want a follow-up. And by not speaking, you're taking the chance away to put your own spin, your own narrative on the follow-up.
And it doesn't have to take that long as well, does it? It can sometimes be just...
It can be 3 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah, it can literally be a few minutes, a few questions. And it does help, you're right, change the narrative.
Yeah, so I think the fact that it's so hard to get players to speak to us after a defeat is, in my view, it's not a great sign of, talking about get bits of character and stuff. And being harsh, I know Fernandes does a lot of the broadcast ones, but I would include him on that. I don't think I can't ever recall him speaking to us after a defeat.
I think that's common.
And a lot of people listen to think, privileged journalists, they expect us to speak,
I think it's interesting to talk about, though, because it does give fans, we've kind of, it's a bit cringy to say it, and we've talked about it, giving a peek behind the curtain and kind of give a bit of detail into what the job's like and dealing with these players.
Yeah, and it's kind of becoming a different debate at this point, but it is a different, still a debate. The media narrative is different now in that it's, previously you're speaking to the written press would be bigger in a way, and there'd only be a couple of TV crews there. The written press would have a bigger reach. Club websites wouldn't have that same reach. Now club websites do. I think I've just seen on the app coming up here today, Toby Collier's done a big interview with the United website. They're almost in competition with us at times. And like I said, there is an awful lot more rights holders. I think players can control their own narrative through Instagram and things like that, even though the way they control it after a defeat, is not very good, is it? Let's be honest. Yeah. You don't need to apologise after a defeat. That's not what fans want to hear. They don't want to hear an apology.
It got to the point in 21-22 when the apologies became such a joke. I think the players did cotton on to the fact that fans were really starting to get annoyed by it.
Yeah. And it just...
Didn't have someone at the club, I forgot his name, but he was employed to look at, was it emotion metrics or something? Fan sentiment graphs. It was fan sentiment graphs, that was it. Looking at fan sentiment on social media, and that stuff just makes you sick.
Fans don't want an apology after a defeat. And especially,
apologise next week and the next game.
I always think, if you've tried your hardest and it's not come off, then, don't apologise for it. It's just not happened. The only thing you apologise for is if you've turned up and given 60% or 70%. But
what are you trying to imply there?
You owe me an apology after this. Like I say, it's a minor thing, but that's one thing that Fernandes and I think all of the squad could improve on. And I know there's going to be loads of people now going, I privilege expect players to speak, and I don't. And if they've lost a game in difficult circumstances, or if it's a thrashing, or if they've lost it in the last minute, or it's a really big game they've lost, you certainly understand at times no one's going to want to speak. But there's other times where they've lost in unfortunate circumstances, or they've lost a game, but actually you think, they've come out of that with some
there's still
positivities to take, and you put someone up to speak to us, and Fernandes speaks, or one of the leaders in the dressing room speaks, and it slightly changes the narrative for the following day. And I think, the fact that United clearly find it so hard to get any players to do it, I don't think reflects brilliantly on the players, if I'm being totally honest.
We'll end this part because we've briefly drifted away from the point, probably longer than briefly.
But he is
actually.
the right captain.
Yeah, he is the right captain. But and I think we'd both agreeing again on a podcast that's supposed to be a debate, that Fernandes has been the best signing in the post Sir Alex Ferguson era. It's not been exactly a huge list to pick from, if we're being honest, because there has been just a catalogue of transfer errors that have been made. Really, who would we have up there with Fernandes? If Fernandes is number one, I think Garnacho has to be up there for me because he was signed, I think, for around £500,000.
Yeah,
and if you sell him now, you're going to make an incredible profit on that.
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. I almost wouldn't put him in the same.
Is that because
category, to be honest?
Is that because he joined the academy first, or he's still a signing?
I know he's still a signing, but he's not. He's not a first team signing, is he? He's an academy signing.
He's a first team player now.
He's a first team player now, but the academy have got a much better success rate with signings, I would say.
I suppose United argue he's an academy graduate, don't they?
And also he cost that much money because of the rules around youth transfers and contracts and things like that. In a world where every player from the age of 10 is contracted for 5 years and has transfer fees, he wouldn't have cost that fee.
Well, I'll be controversial. He has to be up there for me. You can write the rules and say that he's not up there.
Maybe I've been pedantic about it, but I wouldn't. I'm talking about signings as in like players that are signed
for the first
going
team
into the team
directly
next week.
Yeah, I get that. Well, if that's the case, Zlatan Ibrahimovic has to be up there.
Zlatan's probably
and
up there.
Joan Mata and Herrera. Herrera won Player of the Year in 2017.
Yeah, probably agree with that.
They're the kind of ones that stick out in my mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone.
Alexis Sanchez. Get the piano out.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone recently.
They're probably.
The only ones you'd look at recently and say maybe they've got a chance is Martinez.
But again, we've talked about his injury record.
Injury record recently.
Fans took to him like a duck to water, and he became a fan favourite.
Yeah.
If you look at his overall time at the club, his injuries have really become a problem.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone at the moment who's at the club that you'd say is looking like a great signing or.
But that shows you. Even Herrera and Mata and Ibrahimovic, they don't really come close to Fernandes and what he's achieved.
No, Ibrahimovic had one great season.
It was a great season.
It was a great season, and he was a free transfer, and it was a horrible injury that stopped him. Mata was a good player. Herrera was a good player, I guess. When you're putting Herrera forward on that list, it still seems a bit.
I don't know. He wasn't player of the year. Fan favourite.
Well, I know.
Worked his socks off.
You'd just think over the last 11 years, like surely they've had more successful signings than under Herrera.
They haven't. That's the point.
But they probably haven't, and that is kind of the problem.
The gist of it, isn't it?
Fernandes is so far clear in first.
Yeah,
like it's first, and then it's like on the floor to the next person.
Do you reckon you could take Roy Keane in like 3 rounds of 2 minutes in a boxing ring if you had gloves on?
No.
Never could I. So we'll move on. That's it for part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the Midweek Debate. We kind of have a scattergun approach, I think, for this second part and just chat about what we want to. United crashed out of the FA Cup 5th round against Fulham on Sunday afternoon on penalties. Xerxes and Lindelof had their efforts saved, of course. Their attentions now turn into Europa League on Thursday, away against Real Sociedad. Ty, United's only chance of winning the trophy now. Yeah, exactly. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, Ty's just puffed his cheeks there because it has been such a grim season. But the season could be over if United don't progress from this 2-leg tie against Sociedad. And we can kind of make the obvious point that it is so important, but away from the importance for football reasons, financial reasons, that's really crept into the back of everyone's minds in the last couple of weeks after those results were released. They need to make it through this tie. Sorry,
I don't think it's this season that ends if they go out over the next week. I think it's next season that ends as well, to be brutally honest, because you take away that revenue from Europe, even you take away the Europa League, take away the Champions League first, and then the Europa League. Probably 120 to 150 million black hole in the finances at a time when they've got money. But
to be fair, that is okay because Anthony will be sold for 200 million after his form for Real Betis.
Yeah, he's flying for Real Betis. One player, I just think you take that money away, and then even going in, if they find, I think we've spoken about this before, but it's coming to the point now And a few, I think Rooney mentioned this on the coverage on Sunday, and I've seen a few other people mention it over the last week or so on Twitter. Like, why would a player sign for United at the moment? Like, why? If they went for Gyökeres in the summer and there's another elite club in for him, which there may or may not be. I know there's the Amorim connection, but why would you do it?
You're still clutching to history, but history is not enough. And
but the thing is also...
You're going to say these players that they're targeting now didn't grow up when United were winning all these. They're not used to them being
Gyökeres was 15 the last time United won the league, and he's probably at the older age of players who United are going to target.
I read your mind there, and you knew what you were going to say. The counter points,
the counterpoint. But it's coming to that point where this generation of players, if you're not trying to sign a 22-year-old, he was 11 the last time they won the league. It'd have been 7 or 8 the last time they won the Champions League. This is a generation that are growing up without the same understanding of what United are than we had. And, maybe it's different for English players. English players will probably still get it. But I just think if you're moving to United now and you've got offers of playing in the Champions League, I mean, it is such a commitment. I mean, can you honestly see them getting back in the Champions League next season?
Well, you need to win the Europa League, don't you, to get back into it?
I mean the season after this.
Oh, sorry, no. No.
I just can't. I just can't see it. And I don't know. I just think as a player, I mean, if you had other offers, it just feels like such a risk now to come to United. And if you are in that position where you've got no European football next year, when they're struggling to rebuild the squad, I mean, it's a massive risk in it. Without wanting to sound dramatic about it, they could easily be 3, 4, 5 years out of the Champions League.
On the plus side, they can still pay good wages. I know Ineos are reducing that and are looking to drive down the wage bill, but they're still going to pay very competitive wages on there. And you're going to hope they're going to clutch at straws and still think playing for Manchester United means something.
Yeah, and it does.
It does, yeah. We shouldn't kind of ignore that point. It does, but...
Well, I think we'll see more signings like Patrick Dorgu, where...
That's the Ineos model,
there's not a huge amount of competition for him. He's on, about 40 grand a week by all accounts. It's a very low wage for a first-team player at Man United. And I think you will see an awful lot more players like that being targeted.
My lunch article today was on Victor Osimhen, arguing that we briefly touched upon that fans were saying we're so desperate to sign a striker in January that they were almost wanting Ed Woodward back just because he would get a deal. I know that was kind of joking. But he feels like a kind of signing that Ed Woodward would make, Osimhen. But having said that, I think you can't penny pinch for a striker, and especially considering United need goals, and Ineos might have to kind of sacrifice certain values and beliefs to maybe sign someone like that this summer.
Yeah, possibly.
They need goals.
Possibly.
It's the most important position.
Yeah, I mean they do need goals. I still think I don't think Højlund and Xerxes are the sole problem here. I think the system and the lack of creativity is just as big a problem. They just don't get chances. Højlund.
But
but I reckon he's gone 18 games without a goal. I reckon he's had 12 or 13 shots.
Yeah, I completely agree. The service hasn't been good enough. We've both agree on that. But 17-year-old comes on at the weekend, and he creates chances out of nothing, and half chances. It's almost out of sniffing out a chance in the positional sense and knowing where to be at the right time. Is it an instinct? Does Højlund have it? I still think he'll come good. I was chatting to Rich about it at Old Trafford last week before the game, and I still think he will come good, but it doesn't... Obi's, or Cheeto, as you know him by his first name, his cameos in the last 2 weeks haven't done Højlund any favours.
No. The Fulham game, you're right, he did, it was a very weird cameo in that he didn't really touch the ball beyond those chances, and he looked, about 20 minutes in, which it's probably working for Højlund, that he's just not in the game. Then all of a sudden he does have those 3 chances. And I think you're right, there is something about being in the right place at the right time. And, he has those instincts, like you say, to sniff out a goal, to sniff out where to be. I think it's certainly easier as the game got more open for him to have those chances than it was for Højlund in the first 68 minutes. I think he was on the pitch when the game was a lot more congested. And I think I was sat next to Rich on Sunday, and at one point you could see we're building up the play. Højlund's in the box. He was waiting for a cross, and as it was happening, we were talking about Højlund, and I said, "You see, every game now he's getting more and more frustrated. Like he is not enjoying being United's number 9." And as we were speaking, cross came in, was nowhere near Højlund, and he literally just grabbed his shorts and roared. And you were like, you see that every game. Like, it is so frustrating for him. And yeah, you're right. It kind of weakens my argument a bit, I guess, that Obi did come on and have those chances.
But there is context to that, and I agree with you in the sense that coming off the bench in a game like that, it is easier to make an impact. He's got adrenaline coursing through his veins because this is his big moment. It's his Old Trafford first appearance. Legs are a bit more tired. They're a bit more weary. So there is context. I agree, but I do think he's done more than Højlund in the small minutes that he's had. But I don't think he should be starting for United. He's clearly not ready.
No, he shouldn't be starting.
No,
this is why they've left him out of the Europa League squad.
Just that incredible foresight, because that was on the agenda. Obviously, Obi. I'll make the joke again. So Cheeto is
But can I just say something on the Højlund thing?
Go on, sorry.
So let's swap Højlund out and put Gyökeres in this team now. How many goals do you reckon he would have scored in the last 18 games?
More than Højlund.
I will agree with.
If you're going to hold us to a figure, so Højlund's got 7, doesn't he? I'd say.
No, I mean Højlund's not scored in the last 18.
Yeah. Okay, in that run.
Is it 3, maybe?
I agree in the sense when you think about Højlund, you think, has he missed huge chances? But I think part of the problem is he doesn't get himself into the position for those chances.
Well, the ball never gets in the position for those chances.
Yeah, but then I get that. But then Obi comes on, and all of a sudden, there's a few moments.
Yeah, but the game was in. The game is getting into extra time.
I think both things can be true. Really, it's not black and white. Really, is it, with Højlund at the moment?
I just think watch them again on Thursday. Watch it next week. The ball does not go in a position where any striker wants it. And I know I know there's a lot of faith still with Amorim's system at the moment, and I'm not saying it's not going to work, but watch how often the ball goes back, the ball goes sideways. They don't get the ball into a position a striker wants it, and that's why Højlund is so frustrated. And if that was Gyökeres, that's why Gyökeres would be so frustrated.
You just sparked something in my mind, actually. I saw a graphic from Opta, and one of their data guys, he created it and looked at every single goal Højlund has scored since arriving at United, and looked at the furthest goal out, so away from the goal, the widest goal he'd scored in the box. And he'd only scored one, and it wasn't that wide. And he compared it to other top strikers who regularly take shots from wider positions in the box. So there's clearly something in it where his positional sense might not be a strength.
I
thought it was really interesting, actually, because you never really think of strikers and where they should be in taking shots from in the box, relevant to the goal.
But I'd probably agree with that. And like I say, I think he's got a lot of improving to do as a striker, and he needs to get better. And I think the biggest issue I think at the moment is his physicality, and he's being bullied out of games a bit too easily. Certainly in the air, I think he's better with the ball to his feet. But if he is that kind of striker who scores from in front of the goal, I mean, when do United ever get a chance in front of the goal? I mean, he had the one on Sunday in the first half, but that was a few yards in front of the goal, wasn't it? I think
it's the Premier League. You can't just expect your striker to only be able to score when it's in and around the 6-yard box. You've got to be able to create. Jack Fletcher on Friday night, FA Youth Cup, I know he's a kid, he's 17, but fashioned a yard of space, cut inside, rifled it top right.
Yeah.
Like, you rarely see Højlund have the ball on the edge of the box, take a touch and score.
I would agree with that. I think you could have stopped that sentence that you rarely see Højlund have the ball on the edge of the box.
and score. Yeah.
Like I say, I don't think, and I sensed it a bit on Sunday, not just with the Onana thing, but a couple of times the ball would go to Dalot at left wing back. And this is part of the problem, that your front five is Dalot, Mazraoui, Eriksson, Xerxes, Højlund. I mean, it's no surprise that team is in the bottom half of the Premier League. But the ball's going to Dalot in a good area on the left, and he's going backwards. And it feels too cautious at the moment. And whether that'll get better when they've got proper wingers in those areas, when they've done more training with it, but it's too slow. And I think, I sensed the frustration on Sunday that what United fans are watching is too slow, and that's not going to help any of your strikers.
They really miss Ahmad, don't they? It was such a shame that
I think it's
injury.
Ahmad and now Garnacho, you see the difference. I mean, the game feels like it's going twice as quick when Garnacho has the ball to when any other United player has the ball.
We just mentioned Obi isn't available to play in the Europa League because he's not been included in the B list. I think it was the A list. I can't remember the exact terminology with UEFA yet, but United haven't got that one sorted out, and no one can blame them for that because I don't think they would have predicted. Was it early January when they had to submit that revised list?
It was, yeah.
Obi trained with the first team on a few occasions, mostly on days. I think only on days when they were recovering and stuff like that. So it's hard to predict this stuff, and
it is hard to predict.
Having said that, Ty, it just feels. I saw someone say it just feels typical at the moment when everything goes wrong for United that this would happen.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that Ethan Wheatley's on that list because he was added in the league phase. And I mean, obviously he can't play because he's playing for Walsall now. So maybe a bit of foresight. You'd look at it and say, we've only got 2 strikers. Should we put him on there? It was on no one's mind that he was going to play at that point. But they were short of attackers. They were getting rid of attackers in Rashford and Anthony. Maybe there should have been a bit more foresight of
signing a new striker in January. That was what they should have done.
If we're not signing a new striker, and I think the squad was done after the transfer window because you're adding players because Dorgu was added. So you clearly haven't signed a striker. Maybe there should be a bit more foresight to look at it and say, if we lose 2 players here, we've got no forwards, Wheatley's gone, who do we add from the academy? And if they were doing it now, they'd add Cheeto, my mate Cheeto. Obviously, they can't add him. So you've got to have been at the club for 2 years to be added as a B-list player. So they have got, I don't know who the next in line would be as academy striker. I mean, Biancheri's out at the moment.
Yeah, no, he's back. He's back. Biancheri's back, but he's, again...
I mean, he's been nowhere
talking
near
about players who
exposure.
Yeah, I recorded a FA Youth Cup special podcast. We'll get into that in a moment. But when I'm talking about these players, I'm obviously giving them high praise in the context of academy games.
Yeah.
You're calling them really talented and really high level at that age group, but it's a different ball game, chucking them into first team fixtures, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think there's another striker in that academy that you would feel comfortable giving first team exposure to. So
Wheatley was that man, but he's been sent out on loan, and Amram hasn't seemed to fancy him.
No,
when he was there,
he hasn't. And like I say, it would have needed a bit of thought. It would have needed foresight, but I don't think it would have needed a genius to think maybe we should just name another striker and do we know the rules that we can't add the one who's next in line after this deadline? And now they are. And it's not just Sociedad. If they do get through this tie and go to a quarter final and say Hoyland's injured, I mean they're really up a creek without a paddle, then, aren't they? So I don't think it's inexcusable. I certainly wouldn't be burning down the offices and holding a protest about it. But
there's no one left in the offices. So
it's fair one. Yeah. I think there's still a fair shout that maybe they should have seen something like this coming and covered themselves.
I've seen a bit of a debate around Amram not filling the bench, and it's not something to lose your hair over, and it's not something to cause a riot about, as you've just said. But I do think it's interesting because he's done it now for successive Premier League games, and young William Murdoch was on the bench at the weekend against Fulham. He's 17 years old because there was another, presumably, an injury to Eli Harrison.
Cup tied.
Oh, cup tied, yeah, well done. But there's been positions on the bench that have been vacated, and I would be of the belief that you put someone from the under-21s in that spot. They might not be ready to come on. That's fair enough. You might not even consider them ever for giving them a kick, but they're still going to learn from the experience of being around the first team on that day. You think of Jack Morehouse or maybe Seko Kone, just being in and around that first team and watching players and seeing how they act and preparing for matches. I just think it's incredibly helpful. Like I say, I'm not going to lose my head about it, but I would include a few players if you can. I would fill out the bench.
Yeah. I don't know what the reasons were. I mean, he did fill out the bench entirely at Tottenham with players. So whether it was to do with the Youth Cup semi-final that you were at, or whether it's to do with 18 or 21 games. Well, yeah,
schedules.
There was
the under-21s on playing, so they wouldn't clash the fixtures. And there's a group of players who haven't featured or wouldn't be allowed to feature in the 18 group, who are the under-21s who could have been available. Tyler Fredrickson, for example, under-21 captain. Again,
who has been on a bench.
Again, I'm probably saying names that people don't know, but thought it would mention it. I was at the Youth Cup quarterfinals on Friday night down in London. United won 3-2 against Arsenal. It was just, really uplifting. I know it sounds quite sad, but when you're watching just negative football, bad results each week, and it starts to take its toll. It was just really nice to report on a positive story. The academy always seems to deliver at occasions like that. I think when United, the first team, are struggling, the academy stands up. So they'll play in the semi-finals now. Their opposition will be determined shortly. I think it's Aston Villa and Plymouth. I know it's Aston Villa or Plymouth in the quarters. So hopefully it's Aston Villa because I don't want to drive to Plymouth. Me, Laurie and Nathan went for 2 quick pints after the Emirates.
Oh, nice.
When you go around to the Emirates, is at the front of I've never been before for first team game, the proper media entrance down by the club stop.
Yeah.
So I've came off my train, the tube, at Arsenal, the tube stop, come into this door.
Not the best tube stop.
No, it's not.
Arsenal, even though it's Arsenal.
Well, Ash Barami, who's an Arsenal fan, told me to get off at that one. I know. So I approached the door and I asked this guy, media entrance, and I went, excuse me, what? And me and Nathan looked at each other. I didn't think he was speaking English. Excuse me? And he was just mumbling this answer. Eventually, we kind of got something out of him, and he was like, go left, go left. And I was like, okay. Just a really thick Cockney North London accent, I think. And
I mean, he was probably saying the same about you, to be fair.
But I said to him, I was like, it's not usually, I'm the one who, you can't understand.
Probably didn't know what you were asking.
Yeah. So anyways, we got sent on this wild goose chase. Takes another 20 minutes. We'll walk around the whole stadium, get sent back around to Arsenal, like the tube station. You know the Emirates. You know how big it is to walk around.
It's not that easy to get around either.
Thankfully, we finally found it. It was down by the co-op, kind of an entrance where the players go through. But Lorio's is a pint actually, because I texted him, right, come around, save yourself a 20-minute carry on. So that was interesting. Pain in the bum. Moving on then for the Youth Cup tie, we'll touch on the protests before we end the podcast, because there's more protests on Sunday afternoon before the game against Arsenal. Another game against Arsenal. The protesting against the treatment of fans, the 1958, and that kind of comes in after the ticket protests. It's all kind of in one, the laying off staff. There's a lot of unhappy fans at the moment, and there's a lot of stuff to be unhappy about.
Yeah, and I think there's a sense that there was a feeling 13 months ago now that things were about to get better, and they've got worse. And the only hope that things will get better is that you believe in Ratcliffe's vision. And I think there's a lot of fans who don't believe in Ratcliffe's vision at the moment. And we are at that point now where teams are releasing, clubs are releasing ticket price information for next season. United haven't done yet. City haven't done yet. I think there's an expectation both will go up. You look at the letter that United wrote back to the 1958 last month, I think it was, when they'd written to them about ticket prices. I mean, that letter, I thought, strongly hinted at ticket price rises. The fact that I don't think it was even signed by anyone at United. I think it was yours faithfully, Manchester United or something like that at the end. The fact that no one's putting their name to it suggested these ticket prices are going up. It's a big issue at both Manchester clubs. Price-wise at United, maybe an even bigger one at City, given what's going on there. The fact that Liverpool have frozen their price. I think they were the third Premier League
West
club
Ham as well
to come out and freeze ticket prices. And Liverpool clearly the biggest to do it so far. So I think that puts pressure on United and City. And I mean, ticket prices are going to form a large part of this. We could hear the £66, you're taking the piss song again on Sunday. And I think there's going to be a lot of that again. But it's not just about that. It's the fact that the Glazers are still here. And it's not been... The idea when Ratcliffe took this minority share and he took control was that, right, this is unpalatable. It's not what anyone wanted. But you can kind of just forget about the Glazers. But you can't forget about the Glazers because it's their debt that is still hanging over this club. It's their debt that is forcing Ratcliffe into this drastic action.
And I think some people saw that as the first step towards the removal of the Glazers, Ratcliffe coming on board and potentially them selling up the shares. I think it's interesting because the 1958, the protest group, do a lot of good work. All their protests have been peaceful and well arranged and well organised. So credit to them for that, and something has to be done. But they are focusing their efforts on removing the Glazers. I think that has been the consistent message, that they have remained consistent and said we just want them gone completely. Is it not more practical to focus on pragmatic solutions, where I think we praise Must as well, and these different fan groups who have done good things? Must are calling for a ticket price freeze.
Yeah.
And I think it's all well and good calling for the Glazers to leave, and that is the overarching issue and the biggest problem. But we've seen how difficult and how stubborn they are to remove. Avram was asked the other week, wasn't he, Avram Glazer, will you sell the club? No. So you're kind of making the best of a really bad situation. At the moment, I think freezing ticket prices would be doing that, because it is hitting ordinary fans and making some walk away from what they love to go and watch every week.
Yeah, I think they're two probably different groups with slightly different aims, really. And it's more in Must's ballpark to be, to have that dialogue with the club about ticket prices, to call for a price freeze. There's no doubt the 1958 one, tickets frozen as well, but they are, they're clearly a more militant group than Must. And I think they would see it as having, yes, whatever form the protest takes on Sunday isn't going to get the Glazers out, but it's keeping the heat on, it's keeping the spotlight on. And I think in a way they do things differently. Must have got that dialogue with the club. They will communicate about price freezes. That can be their aim. I mean, Must want the Glazers out as much as the 1958 do. But the 1958 a lead-in protest that maybe must feel that they can't do, that the supporters trust have, like I said, they probably have that deeper dialogue with the club.
It's important to
representing
have
fan
both
concerns.
groups, isn't it? Because
that's the thing.
You must hand it diplomatically and have those kind of conversations and the dialogue. And you're right. And then the 1958 are that military kind of arm of fan group, I suppose.
Yeah. Like I say, I think they've got the same aims, but they're going about it in different ways. And it is in kind of must wheelhouse to look for that price freeze. I've said it here before, there's got to be a price freeze. There can be absolutely no justification for United raising ticket prices to watch this United team. Absolutely none at all, especially when, so many cuts have already taken place this season. So I think if they come out and, I think the protest is going to be a big one on Sunday. I think the last 13 months, the hope that people felt last February has just been completely stripped away. And I think, the 1958 obviously called for people to wear black today, and it says it feels like the club's dying. I mean, I don't think it feels like the club's dying in the sense that it's going to die soon, but I totally get what they mean, and it does feel soulless now. No one really seems happy to be there. It feels soulless. It feels empty, and it just feels. It feels really, really draining and boring. And I know we're in a privileged position to get into to games for free, but even walking out on Sunday, and my only connection with United is that my wife supports them, so she'll be in a better mood if they win, and that it's easier to do our job if we win. I'm a Shrewsbury fan. I've got problems with my own when our captain's been sent off after 8 seconds. So, but even with that, with not even not being a United fan and only having that connection of covering them, when you cover a club intently, you do get some fondness for the people involved, but walking out on Sunday, it just felt so flat, and it's like, this is just so boring. And that's what I mean. The team are boring to watch at the moment, and it might sound brutal, but it's true. There's nothing. You can't watch that game on Sunday and think this is entertaining. It was a slog. It's hard work to watch them. There's nothing entertaining about it, and it kind of just adds to that sense on and off the pitch that they are in this kind of black hole, and how on earth do you get out of it? And you're right. There don't feel like there's any sense that the Glazers are going to go, do you know what? Yeah, we're out. And even if they did, is Ineos the answer for a full takeover? On the evidence so far, not that you've seen, but I don't think. I don't think for a fan group like 1958 and for fans that don't just care about what's happening this season, but care about the future for United, I don't think sitting on their hands and doing nothing and just accepting it's not a lot of fun at the moment is much of an option.
Well said. And going back to kind of the negativity, that's why I was just enjoyed again Friday so much.
Yeah.
Seeing a proper United team winning in fantastic fashion, and there was around 100 fans there at the Emirates. Probably some London-based supporters there, of course, but hopefully in the semi-finals they're supported by a few thousand, even if it is away from home, because it is the biggest. You've obviously got the women's team, but the biggest positive story I'd say in this side of the football club, anyways, that we touch on and discuss. We'll leave it there then, Tyrone. And just a quick message, so we won't be back next week. I'm gallivanting. I'm off to Cheltenham.
You'll be in a ditch this time. Yeah. Well, first day actually, isn't it? So you won't be in a ditch just
9 days off. I'll be in horse heaven. Either when I'm back on the podcast, I'll either be smelling the money or I'll not have a penny to my name. I think it'll go one way or the other.
It'll go one way.
But I'm looking forward to drinking and gambling like a degenerate for a week. So that'll be interesting. So thanks for listening. Thanks, Ty, for your time as usual.
Thank you, Stephen. Enjoy Cheltenham. Try and come up with your coat.
I'll try and enjoy it. I'll try and enjoy it. Thanks very much for listening as usual. Again, comment on the podcast on YouTube, like and subscribe. Let us know if you've enjoyed it, if you're on Spotify and Apple. Have a great week. Take care.